From the land of 10,000 lakes and just as many heartaches, welcome to the 301 Show. We're here to celebrate, commiserate, and maybe, just maybe, see a Minnesota team win it all. Whether you're dreaming of a Vikings Super Bowl, reliving the glory days of the Twins, or still recovering from the Timberwolves roller coaster, we've got you covered. This is the 301 Show, where the North remembers and the passion never fades.
Yes, welcome into the 301 Show, episode 28 here. We got a great episode here today. Again, like, subscribe to the channel. It really helps me out. We get into the Twins actually putting together a couple of wins, plus another big announcement on the All-Star game and the All-Star break in general. The Vikings, we've got some more off-season talk. Looking forward to this upcoming season too. And then the Lynx and the Timberwolves. The Lynx continue their absolute dominance at this point. Timberwolves, we continue their off-season news. And then the hockey teams are continuing their off-season news as well. So we've got all of that and more here on the 301 Show. All right, moving on to the Nordic Report here, the first segment of the episode. Again, not a ton of news coming out of Egan, TCO Performance Center. So we'll have schedule prediction 2.0. Training camp does start next week. I'm sure we will get some interviews, sound bites to discuss next week. But for right now, not a ton to report. So we've got the schedule prediction 2.0. My last predictions, I think I had them going 12-5. And so this one, I tried to make myself come up with a different record of not 12-5 this time. And then maybe the next schedule prediction we do is best case scenario, and then the one after that is absolute worst case scenario. So I think this time we just did however you feel the season's going to go, just come up with a different record than 12-5. So week 1, they play at Chicago on Monday Night Football. I have that as a win. Week 2, they have their home opener against the Atlanta Falcons. See if Kirk Cousins is still on the Falcons roster. My official guess is probably no. By week 2, they play Sunday Night Football against the Falcons. I have that as a win. Week 3, home against the Bengals. First noon game of the year. I have that as a win. Again, officially too, I could see that being a 35-34 game where it's just an absolute shootout because of the cornerback situation in Minnesota and then just how bad that Bengals defense is as well. Week 4, they go to Dublin to play the Steelers. They go Dublin first. That will be an 8:30 game on Sunday in week 4. I don't have the exact date written down, but the Sunday of week 4, that is an 8:30 Central Time game. I've got that as a win over the Pittsburgh Steelers. Again, I think that one will be close. And coming off of the Bengals game, I could see the Bengals, again, being a 35-34 game. I could see this one being a 17-15 game, like a very low-scoring game. Then they stay over in Europe. They go to London, another 8:30 Central Time start. I got that as a win. I've got them 5-0 going into the bye week, just like last year. And just like last year, I have them stumbling out of the bye week in week 7. They lose to the Philadelphia Eagles at home at noon. I think the Eagles, just as defending champs, are still very good. So I've got them losing against the Philadelphia Eagles at home. Then a short week, they travel to the Los Angeles Chargers on Thursday Night Football, 7:15 game. Jim Harbaugh playing against his former quarterback at Michigan and J.J. McCarthy. Again, knock on wood, everything goes well. J.J. is the starter still in week 8. I've got that as a loss. That the short week with Justin Herbert and Jim Harbaugh being able to know his guy, I've got that as a loss in week 8. They are currently 5-2 on the season, and then they have a longer week. They got 10 days off. It's the quasi bye week after playing on Thursday Night Football, but they go to Detroit on that Sunday. I've got that as a loss as well. So 3 straight losses, go from 5-0 to 5-3. Week 10, they back home again at noon against the Baltimore Ravens. I've got that as a win. They beat the Baltimore Ravens at home, and then they're hosting the Chicago Bears the next week. I've also got that as a win. So they're 7-3 now through week 11. That sets up another divisional matchup against the Green Bay Packers in Green Bay at noon. I've got that as a win. Again, they seem to always do well in the first game against the Packers in the year, no matter what site that's at, if it's in Green Bay or in Minnesota. The Vikings seem to pull out the early game, the first game of the season win. So I've got that as a win in week 12, moving them to 8-3 on the year. If they get one more win, that'll put them officially mathematically over 500. And I do have that win coming in week 13, the next week, against the Seattle Seahawks at 3:05. I think Seattle, obviously new quarterback in Sam Darnold. I think KOC and the Brian Flores defense knows Sam's weaknesses, so I think they can exploit that. Also, Seattle's offensive line isn't that great. I think that's part of the reason why Darnold did so well here, is because he had a very good offensive line here. And when the offensive line didn't play well, those are his worst games. The last 2 games of the year, the Detroit game and the playoff game against the Rams, were just objectively his 2 worst games of the year. So the offensive line, I think, is big for Darnold. And I just don't think theirs is as good as the Vikings is. So I think they're going to be able to pull out a win there. Week 14, home against the Washington Commanders. That's a loss. I think Washington's going to be good again this year. I think that they're going to be battling with the Eagles for that top spot in the NFC East. And I think that the Commanders end up taking that game at US Bank Stadium. They continue their run of NFC East teams by traveling to Dallas to take on the Cowboys on Sunday Night Football in Week 15. I've got that as a win in Dallas. Then they go from Dallas to New York to play the Giants. Again, noon game on Sunday, Week 16. That's a win. I've got that as a easy win. That's like the Browns. To me, that's like the Browns game, where Giants and Browns seem like the easiest wins on the schedule. Again, knock on wood, I say that now, and they'll end up losing those games in the actual playing of the games. So that puts them at 9-4 on the year. No, excuse me, 11-4 on the year, going into Week 17 and Week 18. At that point, they've got a chance to win the division, I think, if they're 11-4 with 2 games remaining. They do play the Detroit Lions on Christmas Day in Week 17, and then the final game of the season, they play the Green Bay Packers. That time is yet to be determined, the day and time on that Packers game in Week 18. I could very well see that being Sunday Night Football again, and the Vikings ending back-to-back seasons with Sunday Night Football. Week 17, though, on Christmas Day, I think the Lions ruined Vikings fans' Christmas Day. I think I had this as a loss last time. I'm going to keep it as a loss this time, and the Lions, play the Grinch in Minnesota on Christmas Day and beat the Vikings. So that's 11-5 now. At this point, they are 3-2 in the division. And if you know Remember what I said earlier? I've got them at 11-5, and I can't have the same record. So I've got them losing to the Green Bay Packers in Week 18, and that brings their final record to 11-6 and 3-3 in the division. I think this is also a pretty accurate here schedule. I could again very well see this happening too with J.J. McCarthy in his not rookie year, but first actual snaps in the NFL that aren't preseason games. So again, we can revisit those when the season ends. The first two schedule predictions. Maybe we'll make a 5.0. We'll do best case scenario, worst case scenarios, 3.0 and 4.0, and then 5.0 will be final official predictions sometime in August, maybe right before the preseason starts, or maybe after the preseason in that week in between the preseason and the regular season. We can do final schedule prediction and have that be the official one for the season. But we'll move on to predictions. Again, Vikings offseason, so we had none come off the board at this point. That keeps my percentage at 36%. And I do want to remind people that this might seem low at 36%, but if you go and look at all of the ESPNs and the other shows like that, talk shows, they aren't actually keeping up with their tracking their predictions. So I guarantee you a lot of them would be like this, or they lay down bunts, that are like the Vikings will win at least one game. I don't want to do that type of predictions. I want to make myself be somewhat wrong sometimes. Have the chance to be wrong is what's the most fun for me. Is gives me the most rush when I actually get a prediction correct. Then, those are no predictions off the board, and just a reminder on the actual predictions. But we will get 3 new predictions on the board here. They are season predictions, so they won't come off the board anytime soon. But the Vikings will beat at least one of Baltimore, Washington, and Philly. I think outside of the division, those are generally 3 of the toughest teams. I think Cincinnati would be the next toughest because of just that offense is so lethal. But they just don't have the defense to go with it. I could see Jaden Daniels taking a step back, but I think Cincinnati would be 4th on this list of outside of the division tough teams to play. Second prediction: Jordan Mason scores a rushing touchdown before Aaron Jones scores a rushing touchdown. And then at least 2 of the following sound the Gallagher horn this season and lead the Skol chant. Naz Reid, Brock Faber, and Philip Gustafson. So all 3 of them could, but at least 2 of the 3 will this upcoming season. It has to be this upcoming season for this to hit. Moving on now to Target Field Talkers. Twins had kind of a confusing week this past week. Their record is now 45-48. They are 3rd place in the AL Central. They are 7th in the wild card, and that is the top 3 teams in the wild card race take the last 3 playoff spots. So they need to hop 3 other teams. They are the 4th team out of a playoff, a wild card spot for the playoffs right now. I really don't think that they are going to be winning the division because they're like 14 games back in the division, and they need to jump the I think it's the Guardians in 2nd place, but either the Guardians or the Royals, and the Tigers just seem to be running away with that the AL Central at this point. So I don't think that the Twins are going to be winning the AL Central. Hitting rankings, they as a team they're batting .239, which is tied for 22nd. They got a .309 on base, that is 22nd by themselves. Slugging percentage, they're 394, which is tied for 17th. On base plus slugging alone for 18th, that is a 703. Runs scored, they're tied for 21st with 387. Home runs, they've hit 107 home runs, which is 12th in the MLB. Walks, they've got 268 walks, which is 26th, 26th most. Strikeouts is 770, which is tied for 50, or not tied for, this is just 15th. So 15th most, 15th fewest, however you want to describe it. That is right in the middle of the MLB. Stolen bases, 48 stolen bases. That is tied for 23rd. Again, they just continue to not run, and like I said a few episodes ago, the stolen bases isn't a problem in and of itself. I mean, the Tigers are dead last in stolen bases on the year, and they have over 50 wins. They're closing in on 60 at this point, and they're the number one team in the MLB, and stolen bases clearly just doesn't matter to them. But it's indicative of the Twins just not being, the Twins just not taking that extra base. If there's a single to the outfield, they're not going first to third on it. They're not, again, on a sac fly, they're not tagging up and taking that extra base that would get them 90 feet closer to scoring a run. And I guarantee you, if they did that, the runs would jump from tied for 21st to in the top 15 for sure. Just by taking one extra base when possible. And will you sometimes get thrown out? Yes, but I feel like the majority of the time that they're going to be able to actually take that extra base and make it safely to that next base, and then have a better chance of actually scoring a run. And there are some guys that aren't fast on the base paths. I understand that. But not everyone can be Byron Buxton. But they have enough guys that can steal bases and can move up 90 feet. They're not an entire team of David Ortiz in his last year. And that's not this team. Are there some guys that probably shouldn't be stealing base? I mean, Carlos Correa hasn't stolen a base since like 2017 at this point, or something like that. And yes, there are slow guys on this team, but they don't, nobody, even the guys that can steal bases and can take that extra base, aren't at this point. And that's costing them games at this point. And that's exactly why I don't think they're going to make the playoffs. I think it is partially because they don't have all Byron Buxtons, obviously. If they did, they'd be running all day. This would be a pitcher's worst nightmare if you get a guy on first base. And I just think that this is more than just personnel at this point. This is philosophy coming from Rocco. So I just think that is where there's a discrepancy in this team. As for the pitching and fielding rankings, the team ERA is ballooned up to a 4.14. It's just tied for 21st. The WHIP is a 1.25, which is tied for 12th, which is pretty good in the MLB. Strikeouts, they have struck out 787 batters, which is 14th. Again, pretty good, top half of the league. Walks, number one in the MLB. Fantastic, 242 walks. They have allowed the fewest walks, which is, again, fantastic. You're not giving the other team just free bases at this point. Like, there were free trips to first base to get on base. As for the errors on the defensive side, they have 45 errors, which is tied for 16th. And I should say 16th fewest. So number one is going to have the fewest. And so that is, again, bottom half of the league at this point. Try to get that up, like get your fielding down, and that, again, it won't affect the team ERA. Because those won't count as earned runs, but it will continue innings, and your pitchers are going to be, having more wear and tear on their arms if you can just fix some of these errors. fielding percentage is a 986, which is tied for 15th. And again, if you just fix some of these errors, that will help the pitching staff immensely. Starters will be able to go longer into games because they'll be throwing the same number of pitches, just, pitch 90 will come in the 7th inning instead of the 5th inning. And then the bullpen won't have to throw, 4 innings of work after the 5th and or whatever it is. And they'll be ready to go. More guys will be ready to go the next day if a pitcher struggles. And you can just save more arms for later. And again, just errors upon errors are just fixing those would be absolutely fantastic. If we look back at this past week, it was a pretty good week against 2 pretty good teams, the Tampa Bay Rays and the Chicago Cubs. Both of those teams are in contention for the playoffs at this point. And the Tampa Bay Rays could be hosting a playoff series in a minor league stadium or a spring training stadium. Chicago Cubs are probably going to be looking to win that division, the NL Central, and you took 2 of 3 from both of them. You walked off the Rays twice on the 4th and the 5th, and then lost in 10 innings on the 6th. And then you took 2 of 3 from the Cubs on Tuesday and Wednesday. You won 8-1 and 4-2, and then you lost 8-1. So again, just kind of a confusing week where, again, you blow out the Cubs, you win a close game, and then you get blown out. And it's just who is actually the better team there, which I will say, Target Field was packed for that Cubs series. There's 30,000 fans there almost every night, and they are just, Cubs fans travel very, very well. There was PCA chants, there was Let's Go Cubbies chants. The 7th inning stretch said root for the Cubbies. Like they were loud. Louder than the Mariners. I talked about the Mariners a couple episodes ago, but they were much louder than the Mariners. And they are very passionate fan base, which is, again, fantastic to see at Target Field. It felt like a playoff atmosphere, even though the away team was, more represented than the home team. So, you've got 3 more games against the Pirates starting tonight on Friday as I'm recording this. You got a Paul Skeens versus Joe Ryan matchup tonight on Friday. 2 of the best pitchers in the MLB. Paul Skeens arguably the best pitcher in the MLB, but definitely 2 of the best pitchers in Major League Baseball right now going up against each other tonight. The All-Star break does start next week. Monday to Thursday, and then games will resume on Friday. As for the All-Star break, speaking of that, couple things in news came out this past week regarding the Twins and the All-Star break. First thing that came out was Byron Buxton will be participating in the Home Run Derby on Monday. Do tune into that. He should be right around a 4 or 5 seed. They asked guys to participate, and of the 8 guys that do participate, they just take the total amount of home runs that they have, and that's how they seed them out 1 to 8. So Buxton with 20 should be right. I forget exactly who else is in it, but he should be right around that 4 to 6 probably in that range. So again, tune into that. Should be a fun event. Then the other piece of news about the All-Star break is that Joe Ryan, again, the pitching series pitching matchup in this Pirate series with Paul Skeens, Joe Ryan was named to his first All-Star game of his career, and this is the best season of his career so far. He has an 8-4 record with a 2.76 ERA, a 0.89 WHIP, 116 strikeouts to 21 walks, which is a 5.5 strikeout to walk ratio. And yeah, just again, by far and away the best year of his career thus far. Again, knock on wood that he can continue that after the All-Star break. Again, he is a guy that is on trade list, I think, at this point, of potential trades that the Twins can make. I think he's probably going to get you the most amount in return of anybody on the Twins at this point, because all of these rental guys that could be coming back or could be leaving, like a Bader, a Ty France, guys like that, Danny Coulomb, they're just not going to get as much assets back because they just don't have all of the team control that a Joe Ryan would. So I don't think he goes anywhere, Joe Ryan, but again, keep an eye out on that. We'll keep an eye out. We'll update you on this show too. But yeah, Joe Ryan making his first All-Star appearance in his career. So moving on to predictions, we had one prediction come off the board, and it should have come off last week. I said Royce doesn't return before July 15th. That was incorrect. That brings the keeps the total correct at 8 total predictions up to 34 now, and that is 24%. As for the 3 coming on the board, we do have 3 new predictions. We'll again, there should come off the board by next week's episode. First one is Joe Ryan will pitch in the All-Star game. I don't know how long he'll pitch, but he will throw at least one pitch in the All-Star game. Paul Skeens pitches 7+ innings against the Twins tonight. And then the Twins will win the Skeens versus Ryan matchup. Again, I think that could be like a 1-0 win for the Twins at this point. So the Twins will win the matchup tonight, Skeens versus Ryan. Skeens will go 7+ innings in that Skeens versus Ryan matchup, and then Ryan will pitch in the All-Star game. All right, moving on to the Wolves' Den now. The Timberwolves are in the Summer League, which there's some pretty big names in that Summer League, which I do, again, advise to tune in. It should be on some of the games should be on ESPN. So if you have the time, I do advise to go over to ESPN and check them out. First, the first round pick, Jan Bernier, is playing Jaden McDaniels, Rob Dillingham, Leonard Miller, and Terrence Shannon Jr., who are all on the Timberwolves roster this past year. They will all be playing and are playing in the Summer League. And Bernier, too, looks, again, just fantastic. I was watching some of the highlights of it the other day. He looks basically like Rudy 2.0, like a young Rudy, basically. And just, I think he had 7 blocks in their first Summer League game. So if he can turn into, again, I know he's going up against other Summer Leaguers. He's not going up against the best NBA players. But if he can do, that again, anything close to that against NBA players, he's gonna fill that Rudy role perfectly and fantastically. So I think he's gonna be an absolute stud coming up here for the Wolves. Then if we look at their free agency that's still going on here. Again, the big fish are off the markets at this point, and they will be. I don't think they're going to be in the market for anyone too big at this point. They are $7 million below the second apron, so I think they want to try to stay below the second apron at this point. But they are $7 million below the second apron right now. And again, I don't know how much he would cost, but one possible option at this point is veteran Bradley Beal. He's a shooting guard. He could be the backup to Ant, and then Dante DiVincenzo and Mike Conley can split time as the point guard, and Dante doesn't have to be the backup shooting guard at this point. Last year, Bradley Beal had 17 points, 3.3 rebounds, 3.7 assists, and 1.1 steals. So he would fit that defensive game too. And as the backup, I'm sure he'd be coming in for Ant and be not asked to just be a pure scorer at that point. That would be still more on Ant and Julius, and I'm sure they'd get him in if they had to sit Jaden down too. So they could get him in to be the quasi perimeter backup perimeter defender. So I don't mind it. Again, I'd want to know what they were signing him for before I pass judgment on what it would look like to sign him. At the beginning of the this show, all the way back in episode 1 last September, I did a standings predictions for the Western Conference, and for this past season, we're going to look at that. I probably should have done this when the season ended, but I did not. So we got the top 10 in the Western Conference and what I said, and I'll go over what I said plus what it actually ended up being. And again, as a reminder too, this was made before both the Luka trade and the Cat trade. So Luka and Cat were still on their respective teams. So as the 1 seed in the Western Conference, I predicted the Minnesota Timberwolves. It was obviously the OKC Thunder. Number 2, I predicted the Dallas Mavericks. It was the Houston Rockets. Number 3, that's where I had the OKC Thunder. It was the Los Angeles Lakers. Number 4, I actually got right. I said the Denver Nuggets. It was the Denver Nuggets. Number 5, I thought Zion was going to be back and healthy. I had the New Orleans Pelicans. It was the LA Clippers. Number 6, this is where I had the Houston Rockets. It was the Minnesota Timberwolves. Number 7, this is where I had the LA Clippers. It was the Golden State Warriors. I was not as high on the Warriors. Again, I didn't know they were going out to get Jimmy at the deadline. But I was not as high on the Warriors as they ended up as good as they ended up being. Number 8, I had the Phoenix Suns. Did not expect them to, be as bad as they were. It ended up being the Memphis Grizzlies. There was a couple of spots off for them. Number 9 was the Sacramento Kings. It ended up being the Sacramento Kings. That was the second one I got spot on. And then number 10, I had the Memphis Grizzlies, which ended up being the Dallas Mavericks. So again, I was 2 off on the Memphis Grizzlies, and I did not expect Dallas to trade Luka and absolutely tank their spot in the standings. So, got 2 out of 10 correct. With a couple of big moves did not expect. So not too bad. And then I also at the beginning of the season, back in that same episode 1, I had predicted NBA awards if they could only be given to Timberwolves players. So I created a Google survey. I will leave the link down in the description, and you can go and vote on who you think should have won each award if they're only given to Timberwolves players. So go down below. The link will be in the description. It is, you can just pick, just a poll. I've got a couple options, up to 4, I think, and then the 5th option would just be other, where you can write in one if you think I missed who should actually win that award. So again, go down in the description down below, follow that link, and go vote on the Wolves 2024-25 season awards. Moving over to the Lynx, who are actually playing still, and not just summer league games, actual games that matter. The team rankings, they are 18-3 on the year so far. They are first in the WNBA, which obviously makes them first in the conference. Points for 4 per game, they are second with 84.8. The field goal shooting percentage is 46.2%, which is first. From 3, they're tied for second at 34.7%. From the free throw line, they're sitting at 80.3%, which is fourth in the WNBA. Rebounds per game, They are at 34 even, which is 8th. Blocks per game, they're at 5.2, which is 1st in the WNBA. Turnovers per game, they are at minus 1.6, which is 11th out of 13 teams, which again, in this entire time that I've started covering the Lynx, that has been their worst category, is the turnovers. They are turning it over way more than they're stealing it away. So, gotta absolutely clean up the turnover part on that. Points against per game, they are number 1, in the fewest, 74.7. Field goal percentage against, they are 2nd, 41% even. 29.8% from 3 are opponents. That is 3rd lowest in the WNBA. Rebounds against per game is 34.2. That is 7th, so right in the middle of the pack. And then blocks against per game, they are 2.5, which is number 1. So they're just not getting blocked as much in when they're going up. As for this past week, they played 5 games since we last spoke. They played the Washington Mystics, which they won 92-75. They played the Golden State Valkyries. Did they? Yeah, they played the Golden State Valkyries. And they won 82-71. They played the Chicago Sky, won 80-75. Those 3 games were all at home, and then now they are on a road trip here. They lost in Phoenix for their third time, third loss of the year, not third time losing in Phoenix, but third loss of the season, 79-71. And then they beat the LA Sparks 91-82. We got 2 games coming up here in Chicago against the Sky. They play on Saturday and Monday, both in Chicago. Again, there's not much more to say other than the Lynx are kicking ass at this point, and they are taking it to the WNBA. Again, literally the only thing to critique is the turnovers, and that's the literal only thing to critique on this team at this point. Nafisa Collier is playing out of her mind, continues to play out of her mind. She's the captain of one of the 2 all-star teams. She and Caitlin Clark drafted their teams. We'll talk about that next time. But they are, amazing this year to watch. And, So moving on to predictions here. Didn't have any come off the board. Kept my percentage at 27%. So moving on to the 3 coming on the board, 2 longer term predictions, and then 1 that'll come off by next week. The Lynx beat the Sky in Chicago both times. That's the one that's coming off next week. Julius Randle is the Wolves' leading scorer in the season opener. So it doesn't matter what the other team does in the season opener. It doesn't matter if it's home or away. Just in the season opener, Julius Randle will be the Wolves' leading scorer. And then at the end of this season, the Lynx will finish number 1 in. They will have the fewest points against in 2025. So their defense will continue to lock down opponents all year. All right, moving on to our last team segment here. It'll be another short one, just not as much to talk about in the Rinkside Rundown this episode. We do go back to episode 1 with the Minnesota Wild and these standings predictions, just like we did in the Wolves' Den. I did the Central Division standings, just the Central Division. I didn't do the entire Western Conference because the NHL's playoff system is so screwed up. So I did just the Central Division standings. So number 1, I had the Colorado Avalanche. It was the Winnipeg Jets. Number 2, I had the Nashville Predators. It was the Dallas Stars. Number 3, I predicted the Dallas Stars, so it was a 1-off on them. It ended up being the Colorado Avalanche. I was 2 off on them. Number 4, it was the Winnipeg Jets. I was a lot lower on them than what they actually were. I should say I predicted the Winnipeg Jets. They ended up winning the President's Trophy, so I was quite a bit off on them. It ended up being the Minnesota Wild. Number 5, I nailed. I predicted the St. Louis Blues. It was the St. Louis Blues. Now they needed a 12-game winning streak to get back up to 5th in the division and or however long their winning streak was. To get back up 5th in the division and get that second wild card spot. But still predicted it. Number 6, I predicted the Utah Hockey Club. It was the Utah Hockey Club. They're now the Utah Mammoth, but predicted them and in 6th, and that is where they were. I think they're going to be a little bit better next year than they were this past year, though. Number 7, this is where I predicted the Wild. I didn't think they were going to have that good of a year. They ended up, having a pretty decent year. They were the first wild card team. This 7th position ended up being the Nashville Predators. I don't think anybody had the Nashville Predators this low on their list after all the signings they had. They had Ryan O'Reilly, Steven Stamkos. I think they reunited Stamkos and Marchessault too. I just, nobody expected them to be this bad this year. So it'll be interesting to see what they do this offseason, if they think that core is still good enough, or if they're going to just tear it all down at this point. Number 8, predicted this one too. This one was probably the easiest of the entire division to predict. Predicted the Chicago Blackhawks. It ended up being the Chicago Blackhawks. They just are not that good of a team. They need as much help with around Bedard as possible, and he needs a lot more help at this point. And it's nothing against him. It's just, in hockey you can't have one player just carry you. And look at Ovi for all those years too. Couldn't make it out of the second round, and he had a better team, but Crosby had a good team around him too, and that's why he was able to win 3 Stanley Cups. But it wasn't like he was winning and in it every single. It wasn't like the NBA, where LeBron was in the finals year in and year out for a decade straight at that point, and like these good players just need help on hockey. You're only playing a third of the game versus the NBA. You could play up to 40 minutes out of the 48-minute game. I mean, maybe even more than that. But the stars in the NBA are playing over 40 minutes. In the NHL, they're playing 25 minutes at most, if that. So the NHL is a lot more, it has a lot more parity in that sense. But those were my standings predictions for the Central Division. Like the Wolves Den and the Timberwolves, I do have a link in the description. Please go look at it. Please vote if you haven't already. It's the Wild 2024 season awards, 2024-25 season awards. And it's the same awards that the NHL uses. Maybe I didn't explain that the best. It's the same award for both of these. It's the same award names that the league uses, but only applied to their team. So, the Wild will have the playoff MVP. They'll have the everything, and so but it's only for the Wild as a team. So please go vote on that one down below. I'll reveal the results on who everyone thinks, or I should say who the majority thinks is the winner for each award. And then we can go over my predictions on each segment on who I thought was going to win the awards and how wrong I actually was. But moving over to the Frost, we can do the same thing for the Frost as upcoming season. I just didn't start covering them until halfway through, and I didn't feel right about predicting their awards when the season was already underway. So we can do the same thing with them this upcoming year. But the Frost, one big piece of news coming out of the Frost was that their 6th overall pick that they had in 2025, Kendall Cooper, did sign a 2-year deal with the Frost. So that's the big news coming out of the women's hockey in Minnesota here. So moving on to predictions now. Again, I said it was going to be a shorter segment, and it is definitely a shorter segment because we have nothing coming off the board here. Total percentage stays at 30% on the season. So Moving to the 3 predictions going on the board. First and foremost, the Wild will not get a divisional spot next year. They could get a wild card spot or miss the playoffs, but they will not get one of the 3 division spots. Next year, also, the Frost will either get the first overall pick or win the championship next year. And yeah, they'll do one of those two. One of those two things will be the result of their season. I should say their pick will be the number 1 overall pick, or they'll win the championship next year. And then Maddie Rooney and Nicole Hensley. If you look at all the duos, the goaltending tandems in the PWHL, if you take the 2 goaltenders for each team that play the most amount of games, these 2 will combine for the fewest goals allowed this season. Nicole Hensley and Maddie Rooney. All right, now moving on to the final segment of the day, the power ranking segment. And the topic for today is what if, the biggest what ifs in Minnesota sports history. So it'll be the top 10 biggest what ifs, in my opinion, on across Minnesota sports and the history. So first one up here at number 10. What if the Joe Smith scandal never happens? If you don't know what this is, the KG era, early 2000s Timberwolves paid Joe Smith under the table and didn't report it on his contract, and they tried to get him basically to save cap space and sign other people, and they were stripped of a bunch of picks and punished, fine, all that stuff. So if that doesn't happen, do they keep their picks, and are they able to build a better team around KG in the early 2000s? So that is my number 10 what if in for this list. Number 9 is what if the Gopher football team beat Iowa in 2019? They were coming off of big win against Penn State, and then they get gut punched against Iowa and lose in 2019. They were still undefeated. They were I think they broke into the top 10 with that win against Penn State. If they beat Iowa, does that affect momentum the rest of the year into the Wisconsin game? Because they also lost the Wisconsin game. If they had beaten Wisconsin then, if they'd beaten Iowa and then beaten Wisconsin, do they make the college football playoffs? And I think there's a strong argument that they should. So what if the Gophers football beat Iowa in 2019? Number 8 here, going over to the Wild. What if they did not sign Parisi and Suter to the deals that they did? And this isn't saying what if they just didn't sign Parisi and Suter at all, but what if they didn't give them those superstar contracts and they were just pretty good stars? So what if they do they sign them in the first place? Do the Parisi and Suter only come here if they're given those deals, or are they able to work out a different contract and able to get them while also retaining a bunch of cap space and putting other players around them and potentially winning a championship? Coming in at number 7 here is what if Dante Culpepper never tore up his knee? They were the Vikings in the early 2000s. Again, were looking like a fantastic team, and Culpepper ended up tearing his knee after having an MVP type season. So if he hadn't torn up his knee, would they have made the playoffs? Would they have won the Super Bowl? Would they, just what if he had never torn his knee? Coming up at number 6 here, close to my heart, is one of my favorite players in the MLB, probably my favorite player in MLB history. What if Big Papi stayed with the Twins? What if they never let him walk and had stayed with the Twins, and then he could have, maybe not 100% would have become the player that he did with the Red Sox, but could have very well become close to that player with the Twins, and how would that have changed the trajectory of the baseball scene here in the Twin Cities? Do they even go on that 18-game playoff losing streak? If they start it, do they end it earlier than they did? Because I personally don't think it gets up to 18 games if Big Papi is on this team, and he was what he was in Boston. Number 5 here, again, I remember this moment like it was yesterday. What if Blair Walsh makes the kick against the Seahawks in the playoffs? I think I don't know if they go to the Super Bowl that year. That's why it's not higher up on this list. But I think they go to the NFC Championship game for sure that year, because the NFC was pretty weak that year. And I think they could have gone won at least one more game in that playoff run. At number 4 here, again, one of the reasons he was my most hated figure in Minnesota sports history. What if the North Stars don't move to Dallas? They won the Stanley Cup a couple years later, and I think it was 99. So it was like 6 years after they moved, they win the Stanley Cup. So what if Norm Green doesn't move the North Stars to Dallas? The Wild probably don't exist, but Minnesota would have a Stanley Cup, and ironically, if the drought continued, if everything else played out the way it did, it's just we would have one Stanley Cup. The drought would still be men's championship drought would still date back to the 1900s if that was the case. Going on to number 3 here, another kick. What if Gary Anderson makes the kick against the Falcons in 1998? I think the Vikings probably have a good shot at actually winning the Super Bowl that year. So I think that's a massive, massive what if. So yeah, Gary Anderson makes the kick in 1998. Number 2, going back to the Wolves. What if the Wolves draft Steph Curry? They had 2 opportunities to, but they pass on him twice in 2009. So brutal no pick there, and they pass on him twice. Number 1, again, I think this is number 1 because I think this was the best opportunity. Maybe the Gary Anderson year too. You could make the argument that this was a better opportunity, but this number 1 opportunity I think is the best opportunity for them to actually win a championship at this point. We're going to the Vikings. What if Brett Favre doesn't throw across his body against the New Orleans Saints? I think if he doesn't throw across his body, I think the Vikings easily beat the Colts in that Super Bowl in 2009, and they would have their first Lombardi in team history. So that is my top 10 biggest what ifs. Let me know where you think I was wrong on this. Also, please comment more suggestions for topics for this segment. So yeah. All right, moving on here. Yeah, thank you for watching this episode of the 301 Show. Don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel. Really helps me out. Comment down below where you think I got things wrong, maybe on the power rankings or on the team segments. And please go to the description to fill out the awards surveys for each of those teams, and we can come together as a community and give out awards from this past season. But until next week, we'll see you next time. Peace.